bought a lot of non-fiction over the last couple of weeks, and I'm going to go through the books that I have read. I am in the middle of reading and I haven't started yet. I'm going to start with what I plan to read very soon, but it is enormous. This is Trotskys History of the Russian Revolution. It is an enormous book, and clearly the Russian Revolution, and we approach its centenary in October this year, is one of the three defining moments of the 20th century. And I do wonder how it's going to be marked. I haven't seen a great deal of attention in the media talking about how it will be marked, but it seems to me that it is a prime moment to unpick what it was attempted to do and how it failed so deplorably. Interestingly, the Trotsky's History of the Russian Revolution is one of Tony Blair's favourite books. But before I read that, I read this, Lenin on a Train by Catherine Merridale. It's one of those kind of moments in history that kind of takes on kind of mythological proportions. Lenin's train ride from Switzerland to the Finland station in St. Petersburg, or Petrograd as it was known then, in supposedly a sealed carriage. So and who arranged for its sort of permission to go through Germany, and did Germany want a revolution in in Russia, because that means that Russia would pull out of the war, and etc., etc. And the sealed carriage, which would mean that he could have no discourse with anybody, through on his journey, etc., etc. So in truth, it's quite a boring story, and whilst it's a kind of okay primer for those kind of early moments prior to Lenin's arrival, and how the architects of the revolution started to sort of move towards Russia after being in exile for so long. It's okay, but I kind of wanted it to be, or expected it to be better. Here, East West Street by Philippe Sanz, I imagine. This has won lots of awards. Lots of people read it. Essentially, it's a personal history of this man's family, which was essentially caught up in the Second World War, in the refugee crisis, in the Holocaust, in whatever. But actually, it's a personal history of two lawyers. There's a lot of lawyers in the books I'm going to talk about. Essentially, a guy called Lemkin, who essentially it's a history moving towards the Nuremberg trials of Nazi war criminals, and how a guy from a city in in Eastern Europe, based in America, created the law against genocide, or to prosecute genocide, and a guy called Lauerpacht, and about how he created the law for crimes against humanity to prosecute that. And essentially, it's an extremely readable and very human story about a number of characters, but essentially it's leading to this to how these two laws that we almost take for granted now, crimes against humanity and laws against genocide, and actually it's a very subtle argument about which of the two is the most effective. Crimes against humanity is essentially trying to protect individuals' rights, where crimes of genocide is trying to protect rights of groups. It's obviously very distressing, but at the same time, as I said, it's because his family are intricately caught up in that. It's a very personal story as well. Sarah Maitland's A Book of Silence. I'm actually only halfway through. She's a novelist, short story writer, and non-fiction writer. But essentially, this book, she looks at ultimately the mystical properties of silence. I mean, she talks about the psychological effects, the physiological effects, but actually, she's looking at. I mean, she essentially kind of decamped from London to the Midlands and then to Northumberland and then to Scotland, searching for more and more extreme experience of silence. And this is her memoir about this, but it also talks about silence in other endeavours. There's lots about, when people do round the world single-handed yacht races, that they can spend days and weeks in kind of becalmed waters in silence, and silence of people who spend time in the Antarctic, and then there's obviously kind of mystical silence and hermits, and it's an extraordinarily poetic, moving and challenging book as to what we lose from ourselves by being in a kind of living in the kind of pandemonium of the modern noisy world. And it's profound, it's erudite, it's sensitive, and it is of course non-judgmental. Another extremely brilliant book, which I'm only about a third of the way through, is The Faith of the Faithless by Simon Critchley. Simon Critchley is a philosopher, and at the New School in New York, although he's British. This is essentially trying to understand whether elements of faith can be transposed into a secular world, into a secular, politically secular community, and what faith can teach us inside essentially kind of faithless world. So it's advocating faith, but it's not advocating God or religion. It's wonderfully written. It is hugely subtly argued. He's an extremely clever and engaging man. You do, I think, need touch points in Western political philosophy to get the most out of it, but not a great deal. But I think if one is looking to understand how we might think about politics away from the purely rational, and in a sense he essentially says that politics isn't rational. He actually talks about politics being a fiction, and he references my favourite poet of all time, Wallace Stevens, that in a sense all of our kind of thought structures are supreme, the ones that work and deliver positive advancement, whether it's spiritual, political, philosophical, artistic, or what he calls supreme fictions, from notes from a supreme fiction, arguably Wallace Stevens' greatest poem. But it is a brilliant book. Just a slight change of tone, which I'm almost halfway through. Anthony Burgess's Earthly Powers. This was a big deal when it came out in the 80s. It's a very long literary romp through the first three quarters of the 20th century. It is funny, it is erudite, it is a little bit spiteful. It is a man writing at the height of his powers, but actually, it all of that belies a serious theological intelligence at work, because the main character is gay, but was part of the Catholic Church, but loses his faith and pulls away from the Catholic Church. And another main character is a Catholic Monsignor, who's an extraordinary character. I mean, I have to say, one of the probably the best characters in all literature. A big, fat, bear of a man who thinks nothing of against physical violence, against what he sees as the devil. He spends a lot of time beating up fascists. I mean, literally beating up Mussolini's fascists, but actually has actually a very subtle mind, and so extraordinary tension between this kind of humorous, slightly ironic romp, and actually what I think is an interesting an interesting relationship with art and religion and Catholicism and whatever, and it actually has a brilliant rewriting of the early parts of Genesis in it. So yeah, I mean, very, very good. This, of which I'm only 1/8 the way through, Team of Rivals: The Political Genius of Abraham Lincoln, which is a book Barack Obama was reading when he first went into the White House, and essentially it begins with the four people who were vying for the Republican nomination in 1860. All of which were lawyers, all of which were deeply engaged in the prohibition of the slave trade and the extension of the slave trade, whatever. Sort of deeply moral men, often supported by incredibly strong, morally principled women, wives and daughters. But it's the joy of this novel is just the pure storytelling nature of the prose. You feel you're watching a incredibly detailed epic film. Its sweep, its characterization is just mesmerizing. I mean, the level of enjoyment I'm getting out of it is extraordinary. It is so wonderfully well written, and given its comprehensiveness to deliver that level of joy and kind of, I guess, kind of ease of reading while being incredibly comprehensive is a real gift. Yeah, there are a lot of books here. The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson. This is obviously done very well. It has done in America and the UK. I don't know about where else in the world. She's just been awarded the Guggenheim Genius Grant, which is about $600,000. She's a sort of memoirist. This is a memoir of her relationship come marriage. Essentially, it's a memoir about, I mean, she says herself, so I'm not paraphrasing, about LGBT and queer theory. She is essentially married to Harry Dodge, who is a American artist, born a woman, transes to a male after after their marriage. They have a son together. But this is essentially just her memoir of that whole time. Now, the beginning is a little crass, and the stuff about the depth of their love is a little precious. But other than that, it is, given its subject matter, one of the most considered, generous, thoughtful and balanced pieces of writing about gender and LGBT concerns that I have read. And once again, she's a very gifted writer, and it is an extraordinary book, and I recommend it. Quickly, we're almost there. Just to kind of move on social issues, I just picked this up at the bookshop. Rennie Edo Lodge's "Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race." I read the beginning of it, and essentially, I subscribe to the premise that actually, kind of middle class, metropolitan, intellectual white people kind of do think they understand racism, and I will both include myself and not include myself in this. Kind of feel almost when we talk to people of colour about their world, we assume that we've read or seen or understand all there needs to be because it's been on the political social agenda for so long now, and actually that's a disservice to the particular. Yes, the general to a degree might be known, and therefore we can be quite comfortable with our our interactions or our interpretations of it, whereas actually the particular, which in the end actually says something more interesting about the general, is often missed. And I don't, I haven't read it. I only read the beginning. I don't know how her argument spins out, but I think it's always important, as essentially privileged white males or whatever, to make sure that we are not just taking for granted that we are that the world has changed. I mean, I was trying to explain to someone the other day that my children who are 13, really their only experience of American president isn't Trump. It's actually 8 years of Barack Obama, an African American president. The inner London state school they go to, the teachers are of different ethnicities. Their classmates are of different ethnicities. They have mixed race classmates who self-identify as bisexuals. They live in a different world where the world seems very equal and diversity is something that they live day to day. But actually, we and through that we can all forget the structural and institutionalized biases that are still prevalent, and that's something that I have to spend talking to my children about, but I also have to remind myself about. Penultimately, The Cut by Anthony Cartwright. This is published by a small press called Pyrene. This is been described as the first a kind of commissioned Brexit novel, and it's just it's a fictionalized. I haven't read it. A fictionalized, which I will do soon. A fictionalized response to the complex issue of Brexit. It's written by an accomplished novelist. It's not long, as Pyrene books are never long. But I'm sure it's worth reading. And then finally, we go to Flights by Olga, I know how to pronounce this, and it's just gone from me, Tokarczuk, maybe, no it's not. She's one of Poland's leading literary novelists, and this is obviously published by Fitzcarraldo Editions, one of my favourite, if not my favourite, small press. And I haven't read it, but I look forward to it. So actually, let's just quickly go to... no, that's it, I think. Yes. So actually quite a lot here, quite a long video. I apologise for that. But we have quite a range of books, of which I recommend all of them. I'm having in... If I had to recommend... I mean, the Team of Rivals, the Abraham Lincoln, is quite extraordinary, but so is The Fate of the Faceless. My partner, Bridget, who almost never reads non-fiction, was absolutely entranced by this. She kind of felt that she'd been ruined for other books for some time, which is one of the reasons I'm not letting her read the proof copy of my own novel, which arrived only last week. Hopefully next week I will be sharing the cover designs for my novel with you. Okay, thank you very much.